Tell us. Tell us about yourself.
So my name is Freddie Mulliman. I am a middle school teacher. So currently I'm teaching 7th grade social studies. Next year I will be doing 8th grade social studies. I'm part of our school safety committee. I'm now our union rep, so that's interesting. That was as of 2 days ago. And I am also on our social emotional learning team.
Fantastic. Very cool. Let's see. So to start that first question, it says learning centered and knowledge centered environments. Just like a brief, that's a weird wording. Basically, learner centered, existing knowledge, and knowledge centered is going to be more rigid, goal oriented knowledge, like a standardized, whatever, like a test at the end of the year kind of thing. How do you balance those? People coming in with different background knowledge and different existing knowledge, trying to get them up to speed with that with the standard set. If people are coming from different starting points.
I would say our school's kind of they're at different starting points. So I try to usually start a unit off with a KWL chart. So what they already know, they just list what they know. What they want to know or any questions they might have. And then at the end, we look back and say, what did you learn?
Mm-hmm.
I do a lot of that to try and figure out what they already know so that I don't have to, repeat myself.
Sure.
I would say that's the main thing that I do to try and figure out what they're already doing. I think as far as if one's more beneficial to the other, I think it kind of depends. So I think it's better to have it centered on their learning and to be more centered on them learning the appropriate skills. And especially for social studies right now, we don't have a state test. So a lot of what I end up doing is reading and writing and vocabulary stuff that will help them with ELA down the road.
Mm-hmm.
But I think centering it around the kind of skills they need to learn, and then also trying to loop that in with the content knowledge. So if they know what the Declaration of Independence means, that I'm going to do that through a writing strategy, if that makes sense.
Sure. No, definitely. Very cool. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So in the classroom, especially with social social studies, do you emphasize group work and how do you what does that look like?
So I don't even have desks. I have tables. So they're in groups automatically. They don't have an option to not sit with a group of people. And then if they get mad, I'm well, no matter what you do, you're going to have to interact with people. So you might as well get used to it. So I actually went to a training through a group called Kagan. And it's all about cooperative collaboration learning. And so they have different group structures that they put kids through. And so I use a lot of those strategies and a lot of those their grouping mechanism so that they're always in a group. But then at the same time, they're always accountable for their own work. So I was always the student who got stuck with kids who didn't do anything.
Sure.
So I had to do the whole project. So and because my kids are 13, they freak out and think they have to do the entire project. And I'm I gave you 4 slides or whatever the number is. I gave you these 4 slides to do. You do your 4 slides. That's your grade. If the rest of your group's going to be stupid and not do anything, that's on them. But it's not. So I do make them work together to turn in a finished product. And they do, but they do get credit for their individual work. As far as peer evaluation, at the end of every unit, I have my kids keep a portfolio of all the work that they've done, and then they have to give feedback to they have to grade themselves, and then they have another of their table mates grade their work.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds great. And how do you assign them?
How do I assign groups?
Yeah, did you randomly assort them, or did you do it based
no.
on?
So what I usually do is I pick something. Depends on how much I want to. Sometimes I just give them a random content-ish test. And then I take their scores and I kind of divide them up into. Oh wait, no, sorry. I know what I did. Because my job is to support language arts, I took their test scores from last year and I sort of lumped them into like high, medium, and low. And then they're in groups of 4. And if the numbers work out correctly, there's a high, medium, and a low that are at the same table.
Perfect. That makes sense. So what do you do to create a sense of community or belonging among your students, like in your specific classroom?
So, I mean, it's really important with my school. So, like like for 2 weeks when school starts, all we do is like fun stuff. So like we just do like team building, community building, class, like the school, like our classroom, like norms. We create, each class creates a social contract. So these are the rules they agree to live by.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to create it. I mean, I spoon feed some of it because they just look at me like I'm weird. But so I try to do that. I try to have a sense of humor with them. I'll try to joke with them. Yeah, I think that's kind of a lot of what I do. We with that Kagan training I went to, they sort of emphasize like once a week do like a class building thing that's not academic, and it can be like 5 minutes.
Sure.
And so like I do try to do that. So like at least once a week, even if it's like the opening activity, they have to like walk around the room and talk to someone about something and then go back.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Yeah, and besides test scores, are there any other ways that you like evaluate students? Not necessarily just on like homework assignments, right? It maybe before they turn something in, so that what they turn in is then of higher quality.
Yes and no. So I mean, because everything's through Google Classroom, so like if they're working on stuff, I can peek in on what they're working on. I usually don't, I walk around the room and monitor what they're doing. I'll read through their stuff like over their shoulder. As far as like, I don't do a whole lot of just straight up tests.
Okay.
Because I don't know, multiple choice tests aren't my thing. And so like a lot of what I do is informal. So like, I coach it, and, if they haven't turned something in that is correct, like if they just BS'd it to get a grade, I hand it back to them and I'm like, yeah, no, thank you. Like, try again.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. So I think that's mostly what I do. So that way they're turning in higher quality stuff when they turn
Sure.
stuff in.
And then also in a lower stress environment, because they're not having to be put on a strict test where they were just memorizing things.
Yeah, and I'm always like, I'll take late work. Like if you're gonna, I mean, other than when the quarter ends legally, I can't change your quarter grade once it's posted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Up until then, I mean, if you're gonna turn something in late, go for it. I'd rather you do the work and it helps your grade.
Yeah.
Because then I also don't have to give them extra credit. I'm like, you're missing assignments. Do those. Thanks.
What are some unique or interesting technologies that sets you apart that you use in learning?
So I've actually done a lot of technology.
Cool.
So Google offers like free educator trainings, and I'm at the highest level.
Humble brag.
This whole learning thing we have to do, I was ready for it in November. Because funny story, like my kids, I was gone one day and they just like broke 15 pencils and left them on the ground, and I was just like, you all have computers that are assigned to you. I'm no longer going to deal with you breaking my pencils. So everything's digital now. So like, yeah, true story. So the ones that I really probably like the most, I mean, I use all the Google suites, so like Docs and all of that. But the ones that I really like, there's an app or it's a program called Seesaw. It's used mostly at elementary. It's free-ish. But basically it creates like a portfolio. It does a lot of what Google Classroom does, except it's a little bit more user-friendly for like younger ages, and sometimes our kids need less buttons to push.
Sure.
So it does that, and there's already like templates of assignments, and that's actually how I grade their like unit binders or their unit portfolio is that they just turn it all in, and then within Seesaw, it lets me look at what they turned in. It lets them like handwrite or take a picture or a video. And then I can like accept it and add it to their portfolio, or I can send it back to them and be like, wrong.
Do better.
That's probably what I use the most.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and that's something. Yeah, that's something that definitely I think a lot of teachers, especially older teachers, are probably not using as much. So I mean, I went to school just a few years ago, and I don't remember any of those things. So any of those being used in the classroom.
Well, yeah, when I did my student teaching a couple years ago, well, 4 years ago, I guess, when I did my student teaching, like my master teacher was very like old school. Mm-hmm. So like it was paper, everything was like lecture and blah 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 blah. And then I got a long-term sub job, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we use Google Classroom," and I had no idea what it was, and I had to basically taught the entire second semester high school, and like I had to learn overnight like what all of it was and how it worked. So it's a learning curve.
Sure. What's your most memorable lesson that you've ever taught, or maybe you teach it regularly?
So I will say, like this year for medieval Europe, after we explained like what we went through, what feudalism was, and like how kingdoms and everything were set up, I had the kids create on a poster board their own kingdom, and they had to make like chivalrous order stuff, so like what their knights were, like what the rules of their government were. It could look like whatever they wanted. So I had one that looks like a cat, whatever. And then at the end of it, they basically I bought like foam dice, and they did like a risk type war. Whoever got the highest roll to see who won. And then I gave like free homework passes or free classwork passes, I think, to the winning table. So.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, very cool. And definitely unique. So.
Yeah, they definitely liked it. So, and then I know next year I'm not teaching the same thing. So I know next year, because it's U.S. history, I'm going to be doing a lot of stuff with like weird election stuff. Because, I mean, we'll have the election happening too.
Oh, for sure.
So like weird elections like in 1800 or impeachment and stuff like that.
And your dream was to teach U.S. history, right?
Yeah, actually, it was so surprising. So I've been in 7th grade because I've been in 7th grade. And then they basically, long story, we're losing teachers because of the district's enrollments going down. So they had to like reconfigure what the master schedule was going to look like. And so I like emailed the principal and the counselors. I was like, hey, if there's any way I can do 7th and 8th grade, like, let me know. That'd be cool. Because I was like, they're not going to give me all 8th, but if they give me a couple classes, that'd be cool.
Yeah.
And then the principal called me. She's like, we have you doing all of 8th grade next year. I'm like, oh, perfect. So I'm not entirely sure how that happened. I know the regular 8th grade teacher is now going to do all Avid. So I know he's doing something else. Mm-hmm. But I was like, I don't know how they moved me, but I'm not complaining.
Don't be too squeaky, because you're in the right place now.
Yeah.
What are some specific ways that you get your students to engage in whatever that you're teaching for the day? Like specific techniques?
So, I mean, I usually do I try to make like essential questions or like bell ringer, bell ringers like the first thing they do in the beginning of a period. I try to make them like very sometimes they're not even related to social studies, or they're like very tangentially related. So like why is there conflict? Like why do people fight?
Sure.
And like that's the lead up for like the Revolutionary War or Civil War or something, So I try to do that. I also like to give them choice in what they're doing. So one thing I did, and then school closed, so I never got to use it. But I created a digital, yeah, it's fun. I created a digital bingo card. So I divided up. So like so each row had like a writing, a reading, like different types of activities. So, and then they had to just pick 5, and they would have to do those 5, and then they had to turn them in. So I'm probably going to do something like that, where they get to pick and choose what they're going to do.
Oh, that works. What's the best piece of advice that you have for planning and staying organized?
Don't be like me, because I randomly reorganize things all the time. But no, seriously, I think it's important to find a way of planning that works for you. So like in social studies, like I have never been the person who does like daily lesson plans. I mean, I kind of do, but like they're very bare bones, and is usually like writing down like what the bell ringer is going to do, like, and then telling myself how much time I'm doing for each task. But most of my planning is I plan like the way the entire unit's going to go, and then I sort of know what assignments I want to do. Um, so yeah, so I guess that would be, I find a way that works for you. During the summer, make a curriculum map. So like plan out like each unit that you're gonna do. I do it like, well, right now I'm doing it right now because school's closed and I have nothing else to do, except play video games for way too long. So, so yeah, so like just I make a map and it's like what I do is I print out the school's calendar, and then like black out all the days that we're gonna have trainings or when breaks are, and then I just divide up the units the way that they would go throughout the year, so that way I vaguely know. And then the last is I'll plan more stuff than you can get done, because I'd rather be the one who's like, we're just not going to do that assignment, I don't care. Yeah. Then like, because then you have it for a future year. Sure. Then like, oh crap, I have to create an assignment.
Yeah, on the fly, which is a lot harder to do than if you didn't lead up to it. Do you ever reuse assignments? I mean, I'm assuming you do.
Yeah. So like one thing that I do, like, yes and no. So like my first year at middle school, because I did like a year and a half at high school, then I got transferred to middle school. So that first year was really rough. Just the emotional level, like the change in their emotional level and what they need and everything. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't necessarily say that last year was my best year of teaching. So like I did all the stuff that I was supposed to do, and I did some good stuff. But then like when I go to do that, like for this year, when I went, I just sort of looked and was like, did I like that activity? Did the kids like that activity? Was it useful? And like some of it I threw out, some of it I changed. Some of it I just made online. So I mean, I do reuse some stuff, but I do tweak it. Sure. So like not unless it's like amazing do I just be like, all right, here you go. Same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so after a lesson, do you think about it? Like coming home, is there like a debriefing period, or is there an exercise you do to see if it was successful?
I will say that is probably something I don't do a whole lot until I have to plan for next year. Mm-hmm. And when I'm like, oh yeah, that didn't go so well. Like if something went really, really well, I note it in my planner. I'm like, this went really well. Cause when I go to plan for next year, I'll look through the activities I did.
Sure.
Again, this year being weird cause I'm switching grades, but, so like that is one thing, I think about it a little bit. I would say that I less evaluate after and more evaluate while it's happening. So like my first period is always the guinea pigs and bless the parts, because they just get whatever's happening. And then like I make notes. I'm like, well, we're going to do it this way. And we're going to, so, I mean, I do reflect on it and evaluate it, but I think that I probably should be a little bit more intentional about doing it after like each lesson or activity.
I mean, I don't know. You know way more than I do.
The answer is I probably should do more of it. But I do, because I'm not one to, I have a pretty good memory about like what the activity did and how it went. And so usually when I'm going to plan and I'm like, oh yeah, that didn't go so well. Well, let's just change that one. So.
And obviously you do value art in the classroom. I mean, your assignment there, but do you like have artwork hanging or any sort of like how is it like?
So I mean, one good thing like I do it in a lot of different ways, like because my background's art history. Sure. So obviously I have a thought process on I have a thought on how art should be in the class.
Yeah.
So I also run our school's art club. So like I have a bulletin board that's for the art club that's in there. So like the kids will see what other kids have created. Um, I do have some just random artwork or like prints of artwork that either students have made in the past or like famous paintings like a Van Gogh and a Monet. And those are put up there just for like decoration.
Yeah.
Um, Creativity, like during the Renaissance, I do a whole activity on. I do two activities. One of them is basically what I learned to do in college, and they're actually kind of good at it, which is like I just give them like a medieval art picture and a Renaissance art picture, and I'm like, what looks weird about what's different about these? Compare and contrast what's happening, like, and so like they actually like they do pick up on like the way the art changed over time. They don't know the words, but they get it, and so that was fun. And then I do teach them how to draw in 3D perspective, which is like one of the big artistic achievements of the Renaissance. And we do that for like a week, where I just take them step by step through how to draw a room with like a single point perspective.
That is very cool. And I'm also really impressed that seventh graders are able to pick up on the nuances. That's fantastic.
Yeah, like I mean, I do pick ones where it's kind of obvious because I do want them to see what the difference is, but they're like, it's like, medieval art doesn't have like a one single perspective and Renaissance does. And they'll be like, yeah, I don't understand why the table looks the way it does. Or crooked. And I'm like, you get what I'm saying. So it's good.
That's so funny. Let's skip 14 that or whatever this cultural sensitivity. In your multiple experiences, have you ever encountered bullying, and is there have you ever done anything maybe policy wise or anything in the specific classrooms to prevent it or discourage it?
So, like, social emotional stuff is a lot of what we do. We have like a zero period, and we do a lot of social emotional stuff in that. Um, like, I try to do some stuff in history that like has them deal with different perspectives, and I sort of like we talk a little bit about it. Like, why is like we think this is a bad person, but why would other people not think they're a bad person? So they can kind of understand that people have different points of view. A lot of other stuff is I do take like the kids who are quieter, the kids who are a little bit sort of quote unquote weirder. Like I put them closer to me.
Okay.
And I put them in groups with kids that I know are just gonna like either be like, yeah, whatever, it's that kid, or like be nice to them.
Okay.
And then when those kids ants, like I do, if kids say something in class, I obviously intercede and like we talk about the way like I always try and tie it back to the social contract and be like, we agreed that this we're going to be like kind or whatever. That's one of we agree we're going to be kind to each other in here. That's not very nice. Like
Yeah,
we
totally.
so that's a lot of what I try to do. And then if they ask a question and kids are like call it a stupid question, I'm like, and I interfere there. So that's most of it. And then if it is a real big issue, then we have like a counseling center and like support staff, and I sort of reach out to them and like what else can I do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so physical engineering of the classroom layout probably prevents most of it from happening, though, right? If you just see the kids that are more mean or the ones that are more prone to pick on people, if you put them on the other side of the classroom, I'm sure that helps.
It helps, right? So it's they're not going to deal with the constant like when I'm helping one group and there's a group that two of the kids at the table are bullying the third, like that's not gonna happen on a daily thing. I mean, the kids, because they're in seventh grade, will just shout out things across the room, and that's a lot easier to interfere and like cut in and put a stop to than like the silent.
Sure. Yeah, totally makes sense. Student comes into class and they have a rough home life. Maybe they don't have a quiet space to work in, or they are like there's just something happening at home that makes them a potentially a poor student. Do you have any techniques or any resources that you give them so that they're better equipped for the classroom, so that they can still perform even though their home life isn't supporting their academics?
So a lot of it, I don't have like any special like steps or anything. Our school has a counseling social emotional center, and so some kids who are really having those issues, there is a one-on-one tutoring that happens in that center. So like that it can be an option. A lot of it is because I mean we have our school population had.
I'm still listening. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine.
My computer just said it was about to die on me, and I can't have that happen.
Oh yeah, that would be not good.
Well, it's being recorded. I'm pretty sure I would lose everything if it dies, so
Yeah.
hopefully it doesn't. So
yeah. So I mean that's a lot of our kids. So I mean we actually had a former student die 2 weeks ago. So like a lot, and it's a small community, so that happens a lot. So a lot of it is like I tell them to like turn in what they can, and I excuse assignments out of the grade book. Like I just give them time to process and get back in, and work. Then once they're more ready to come back in whatever form, then I talk with them and like, all right, so you were gone for a month basically and you lost all these points. Like, let's figure out how we can, like, what's a fair solution so that you're not playing catch up for the rest of the year.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Makes sense. I'm sorry, I'm kind of skipping around here just because we are running a little long. What do you like to teach in your classes that isn't necessarily a curriculum based, or that there's a standard based around it? Something separate. Something that you like to include in your lessons that isn't mandatory.
So like, I would say like I include a lot of the art stuff because that's not a standard. Mm-hmm. So I include that. I like to give them a lot of options on how they want to present things or how they want to do an assignment. I would say that's a lot of it. Give them a creative outlet, and then also just, giving them a creative outlet and giving them choice in what kind of work they want to do for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the choices is super interesting. I don't know a lot of teachers that give you a choice on what kind of assignment or how you wanted to do the assignment. So
yeah, there's some boundaries, but I do give them.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Doing the assignment is important, right? I'm sure that a lot of people are like, oh, let's just not do it, right? That's their suggestion. What do you do outside the classroom? I mean, obviously you take a lot of those training courses through Kagan and all the other Google style trainings. But what else do you do to stay sharp?
So to stay engaged in like my specific content area, there's a couple of podcasts I listen to on the way to and from school that are like about history or American politics, because that's not what I'm teaching. So I try to do that. There's other like education based ones, like just about the field of education I listen to that kind of like help, frame things in a different way if you had like a really rough day. I try to, like, some of the technology trainings are completely free that our district happened to offer. So, like, I do try to experiment with new things just because...
they're the tools. You should use them.
Yeah, and the last thing is I work with a lot of my colleagues. So, like, I made a couple of good friends who are colleagues, and then we just run ideas by each other because a different set of minds,
Absolutely.
You ideas, so...
So what's your long-term goals, professional goals? Where do you see yourself?
If you'd asked me a year ago, I would have said going back to the high school and teaching like government, U.S. history, and maybe AP art history. But I kind of really like being at the middle school, at least this specific middle school. So like for now, like my goal is kind of to stay where I'm at. So I would like to stay in 8th grade. I'd like to eventually be the department chair. It's a small enough school, it's easy to do. I just became the union rep for next year, so I think being involved in the union is interesting. So, like, one thing I would like to do, actually, is be on the committee to reopen schools for our district, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think that's generally it. I don't really have plans to go back to high school. If there were an opportunity where I could stay where I'm at, but like digitally teach like AP art history, I'd be potentially interested. But I'm kind of in a good place where I'd like to stay for the foreseeable future. So
Cool. I mean,
yeah,
that's the dream, right? You found it.
right.
That's great.
And it happened very weirdly. I did not. I got involuntarily transferred from high school to middle school, and like my first year was just like terrible. Didn't think I'd like it, and gave it another year this year, and I'm like, all right, yeah, this is good. So
um, well, thank you so much for all of your help, and I do
yeah, no
appreciate it.
problem.
And I'll make sure that I talk to you soon. Now, I'm not going off. I just needed to sign.